In the busy marketplace, rumors spread quickly like a fire burning out of control. Many people in the market were superstitious and easily believed in myths. Alex, with his very light skin and striking eyes, caught their attention. Some people began whispering strange things about him. Among them were two greedy men hungry for wealth and power. They came up with a terrible plan. They thought Alex's albinism gave him magical powers. They believed that if they used him in a ritual, they would become rich beyond their wildest dreams. "We have to act fast," said one man who was skinny and had a deep scar running across his cheek. His eyes kept darting around nervously, as if he was afraid someone might overhear them. "The boy is always with his mother. We need to figure out how to get him alone." The other man, who was big and had a rough voice, agreed. "We'll create a distraction, something big enough to make her leave his side." Over the next few days, they paid a young boy who lived on the streets to spy on Alex and his mother, omalicha. The boy followed them everywhere, noting the roads they took, the times they left the market, and the quieter streets they walked on their way home. The two men looked at every detail and carefully added it to their wicked plan. One humid evening, they decided to act. The market was closing for the day as the sun set, painting everything in a golden glow. Alex and his mother were heading home carrying their groceries as usual. Suddenly, chaos broke out ahead of them. A man stumbled and fell to the ground, clutching his chest and crying out as if he were in terrible pain. Without hesitation, omalicha ran to help him. She couldn't ignore someone who might be in trouble. "Stay right here, Alex," she told him firmly. She put her basket on the ground beside him and rushed toward the man. From the shadows, the skinny man with the scar quickly appeared. He moved silently and acted fast. He held a cloth soaked with chemicals over Alex's face. The strong smell made Alex feel dizzy and weak. He tried to scream, but his voice was muffled and soon he could barely move. Everything went dark as he lost consciousness. Back at the scene of the fake emergency, omalicha suddenly felt a wave of fear. Something didn't feel right. After the crowd around the man began to scatter, she turned around to look for Alex, but he was nowhere to be seen. Her heart raced as she called his name over and over again. A street vendor who had noticed the strange behavior of the two men earlier hesitated before speaking. Finally, he told omalicha what he had seen. His words made her blood run cold. Her son had been kidnapped. Omalicha wasted no time. She begged the people nearby for help. Some agreed to join her: two young men from the neighborhood, the street vendor, and even an older woman who usually ignored her. Together, they tried to figure out what had happened. They asked others if they had seen anything unusual. Bit by bit, they gathered clues, following the direction the kidnappers had gone. Omalicha also called the police and shared all the details they had uncovered. Her desperation gave her strength, and the small group helping her became more determined. They felt it was their duty to find Alex before it was too late. With the police involved, the search became faster and more organized. Alex woke up in a dark, dirty room. The walls were cracked and the air smelled terrible. His hands and feet were tied up and fear gripped him like a heavy chain. Two men stood over him, watching him closely. "Stay quiet, boy," said the skinny man with the scar. His voice was cold and harsh. "You're going to make us very rich." Alex's heart pounded so loudly he could hear it in his ears. He felt helpless and terrified. The dim light in the room made everything feel even scarier. Thoughts raced through his mind. What were they going to do to him? How would he escape? Tears filled his eyes as fear turned into deep sadness. He felt abandoned and alone. He thought about his mother and siblings. He imagined his mother frantically searching for him, her heart breaking as she called his name. He pictured his siblings crying at home, scared and confused, wondering where their brother was. The weight of these thoughts pressed down on him, making his fear even harder to bear. Alex sat in the dark room feeling like he had reached the end. His tears streamed down his face as he thought, maybe this is how my story ends. A deep sadness filled him, making him feel like there was no way out. It was as if a heavy blanket of hopelessness was smothering him. Still, deep inside, a tiny bit of hope flickered, refusing to go out completely, waiting for someone to save him. Then he heard faint footsteps. At first he froze in fear, his heart pounding loudly in his chest. These steps didn't sound like his mother's or his siblings, they were slow and cautious. Alex thought the worst, his kidnappers must be coming back to hurt him again. His breathing became quick and shallow, and his body trembled with fear. He had spent so much of his life feeling alone and unloved that the idea of someone coming to rescue him felt impossible. To him, those steps meant only more pain. Suddenly the footsteps turned urgent, and a loud banging on the door broke the silence. "Open up! We know you have the boy," shouted a determined voice. It wasn't the police, but a group of people Alex never expected to care about him. 2 neighbors who Alex thought didn't like him were there. A strict shopkeeper who had once scolded him and a quiet neighbor who rarely spoke to anyone had also joined. They had all come together to save him. Inside, the kidnappers panicked. They had been in another room, feeling safe as they planned what to do next. But now they scrambled to escape. Before they could get away, the door burst open and the rescuers rushed in. In the chaos, the kidnappers were caught, and Alex, shaking and crying, was freed by the neighbor. As they carried him out, the neighbor gently whispered, "You're safe now." The police arrived and arrested the kidnappers, exposing their evil plan. They had believed Alex's albinism gave him magical powers and planned to use him in a ritual to get rich. The whole community was shocked and angry when they learned the truth. They promised to stay alert and protect others from such horrible acts. Alex was safe, but the experience left him shaken and scared. He found it hard to trust anyone, and the pain of what had happened weighed heavily on him. Yet, as he sat surrounded by the people who had rescued him, he couldn't deny their kindness. These were people he had thought didn't care about him, but they had risked everything to save him. For the first time in a long while, Alex felt a small glimmer of hope, like the sun peeking through after a storm. When Alex was finally back home, his mother Omalicha hugged him tightly, crying as she held him. Her tears soaked his shoulder, and her trembling arms clung to him as if she was afraid to let go. "You're not alone, Alex," she said, her voice full of love and pain. "There are good people in this world. Don't ever forget that." Alex held onto her, his own tears flowing freely. The warmth of her embrace reminded him of all the times she had been there for him, comforting him during storms and cheering him up when he was down. Her love felt like a light cutting through the darkness of what he had just endured. In that moment, Alex realized how strong and unshakable her love for him was. Even though he was safe now, Alex couldn't shake off what had happened. He stopped talking to people and barely left his room. The pencils and sketchbooks he used to love so much sat untouched in a corner. His siblings tried to cheer him up with games and jokes, but nothing worked. Days turned into weeks, and it felt like Alex would never come out of the dark place he was in. Then one day, a letter arrived. It was from one of the classmates who has always ridiculed and taunted Alex. The note was short but heartfelt. "I'm sorry for how I treated you before. You're braver than any of us. Your art is amazing, and I hope you never stop creating magic." The letter was signed off by many of his classmates. Alex read the letter over and over. It felt different from anything anyone had ever said to him before. The words felt real, like they came straight from the person's heart. For the first time in weeks, he felt a small warmth inside. When he looked up, he saw his mother sitting quietly in the corner. Her face was lined with worry, and she looked so tired. Seeing her like that made Alex realize how much she was still hurting for him. She had risked everything to save him, and now she was silently carrying the weight of his pain. Alex decided he couldn't let her suffer anymore. He would try, for her, for his siblings, and maybe even for himself. Alex picked up a pencil and began to draw. At first, his movements were slow and hesitant, but as he continued, emotions he had been holding inside poured out onto the paper. His drawings became raw and full of meaning, showing his pain and his strength. Alex concentrated his time and energy to his arts. It meant a lot to him. It was his safe haven. The more Alex worked, the more people noticed his talent. His teachers started displaying his drawings at school, and his classmates, even the ones who used to tease him, began treating him with respect. His story of survival inspired many, and even people in his neighborhood admired him for his courage and his art. Not everyone was kind, though. One day a shopkeeper sneered and said to him, "Why waste time on art? You'll never make a living out of it." The words hurt, but Alex didn't let them break him. He had grown stronger with the love of his family and the support of those who believed in him. Omalicha, as always, encouraged him. "You're special, Alex," she would say with pride. "One day, the world will see it too." Those words gave Alex the hope he needed to keep going, to believe his journey was only just beginning. Just as life seemed to be settling down, something terrible happened. Omalicha, Alex's mother, fell very sick. Her health got worse quickly, and soon the family was struggling to pay for her medical treatment. Alex was terrified that he might lose her. The thought of being without his mother felt unbearable, and he was filled with dread and helplessness. In an effort to help, Alex threw himself into his art. He worked harder than ever before, hoping that his drawings could bring in money to cover his mother's medical bills. He took on any art job he could get, whether it was drawing portraits, painting murals for local businesses, or creating small pieces for customers. Alex spent countless hours working, his hands covered in paint and charcoal as he worked late into the night. He barely rested, but he found comfort in his art. Each stroke of his pencil or brush felt like an act of love and hope for his mother's recovery. His art was his way of showing that no matter how hard life got, he wouldn't give up. Omalicha, despite her worsening condition, watched him with both pride and worry. She saw how hard Alex was pushing himself, working tirelessly to help her, but she also knew how exhausted he was becoming. The whole community began to take notice of Alex's dedication. More and more neighbors asked him to create art for them. Word about his talent spread quickly. Alex's artwork became highly sought after, and one of his most powerful pieces, a radiant portrait of Omalicha, touched the hearts of many. This piece was displayed all around their town and eventually beyond it. Soon after, Alex and his family heard about an art competition sponsored by the government. The winner would receive a large sum of money and a government educational sponsorship. The money could cover Omalicha's treatment if Alex manages to win. The news sparked a bit of hope in Alex's heart. His teachers, family, and even the principal of his school all encouraged him to enter the competition. The competition was fierce. Artists from all over the country entered, each one showcasing incredible skills. Alex was filled with both excitement and fear. He worked day and night, determined to create something that could stand out. But self-doubt and anxiety often crept in. He wasn't sure if he was good enough. The pressure to win was immense, and Alex began to question if he even deserved to be in the competition. His past experiences, especially the trauma from the kidnapping, made him feel unworthy of such recognition. But in those dark moments, Alex would remember the comforting words his mother had shared with him. She had told him, "Winning isn't the most important thing. Sharing your art and being seen, that's already a victory." These words gave Alex the strength to keep pushing forward despite his fears. As the final round of the competition approached, Alex's anxiety grew, but so did his determination. He reminded himself of all the people who believed in him, his family, teachers, and even some of his classmates who had once been indifferent or even unkind. Alex finally presented his artwork to the judges. He poured all his emotions into it. He gave it everything he had, hoping that the judges would see the heart behind the piece. The applause he received after presenting it was like a weight being lifted off his shoulders. It wasn't just a win for the competition, but a triumph over his own self-doubt. Alex felt proud of himself just for having made it this far. After what felt like an eternity of waiting, the room was thick with tension. Everyone sat on the edge of their seats, eyes locked on the judges, their minds racing with anticipation. Alex's heart pounded in his chest, each beat louder than the last, as he nervously shifted his weight from one foot to the other. The air was heavy, as if it could crack under the weight of everyone's expectations. He tried to steady his breathing, but his hands trembled, the fear of what was about to happen threatening to swallow him whole. The judges exchanged glances, their faces unreadable, making the seconds stretch on like hours. Alex's thoughts swirled in a storm of doubt. Was it enough? Had he done enough? His mind raced, questioning everything he had worked so hard for. Would his art really stand out, or would it be another dream that slipped away? Finally, after what felt like an endless silence, one of the judges stood up. Alex's stomach flipped as all eyes turned toward the stage. The judge cleared their throat, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to stop. Then, with a voice that rang clear through the room, they spoke, their words hanging in the air like a promise. And the winner of this year's art competition is Alex. The room erupted in applause, the sound deafening in its intensity. Alex's heart skipped a beat as the words sank in. His name, spoken aloud, felt like a dream he wasn't sure he deserved. The tension that had built up in him over the past moments melted away in a flood of relief, but the rush of emotion was almost too much to bear. His legs wobbled, and for a moment he thought he might collapse. The cheering grew louder, and Alex's mind raced to catch up with the reality unfolding in front of him. It was really happening. He had won. Alex was frozen, unable to believe it. He looked out into the crowd, seeing his sick mother's face light up with pride, even though her eyes were filled with tears. His siblings jumped up and down, clapping and shouting with joy. Alex's heart swelled with emotion, but what took him most by surprise was the sight of some of the classmates who had once teased him. They were now clapping and cheering for him too, their faces full of genuine respect and admiration. Even his teacher, Mrs. Obiora, who had always believed in him, was beaming with pride. Several other schoolmates, some of whom he barely knew, were waving at him with big smiles. Alex's victory didn't just change his life, it also transformed his family's future. With the prize money, Alex was able to pay for Amaka's medical treatment. Slowly but surely she began to recover. Alex also used the money to move his family into a better home away from the struggles they had faced in their old house. The government awarded him an educational scholarship covering his education costs until his university degree, easing the financial burden on his family. This new stability gave Alex the chance to focus on his art without the constant worry of how to support his family. As Alex's work gained more attention, he became known as a symbol of resilience and hope. His art not only reflected his talent, but also his journey through hardship. His story inspired others to keep going no matter what they faced. People around the country began to admire him for both his artistic abilities and his unwavering spirit. But even with all his success, Alex stayed humble. He never lost sight of why he started creating art in the first place. It was his way of expressing himself, his way of making sense of the world. As his art reached more people, Alex knew that he was not just creating to survive, he was creating to thrive. Surrounded by his family and the people who now supported him, Alex understood that he was no longer the boy who had been alone and isolated. He had found his place in the world. Despite the struggles, the fear, and the hardships, Alex had found his strength through his art. His journey wasn't over yet, but now he faced the future with hope and confidence, ready to take on whatever challenges came his way.